Migration is a big part of solving the issues that have been canvassed at the Jobs Summit, but we've just heard there are 900,000 visas yet to be processed in the system, and that's come down from 1 million. So there's a big problem there. The government are committing $36 million to get more staff, 500 more staff in the department to get this going. But that is a clear indication, a clear example of how some businesses are being held back, and it's right across multiple sectors. Joining me now is the New South Wales Premier, Dominic Perrottet. We saw you in the Jobs Summit. You liked this announcement, but when it comes to visa processing, I mean, that you must be tearing your hair out. Like, you need these workers yesterday.
Well, I think if you go back the last couple of years, there are clearly areas of the public service that weren't doing anything. There was obviously, through a whole range of departments, a lot of focus on getting our people through the pandemic from a health side and economic side. But what a wasted opportunity to be sitting there and not allocating resources to getting these visas processed. Now, my understanding is that the federal government has allocated significant additional resources to Home Affairs to get these visas processed. But when you've got that many in a backlog and you've got people overseas who are making a decision in relation to where to live, well, if it's taking months here, we're not really up there with the rest of the world.
And Dan Walton just made a really good point, saying, you know, Australia's amazing, Sydney's amazing. We think everyone wants to come here, but we're a bit arrogant because our reputation isn't as good as we think it is. Is that right?
Well, take international students, for example. This is something I worked on as Treasurer during the pandemic. We had, obviously, we sent many students home. And at a time during that period of 2 years, we had other countries, the UK, Canada, that were really aggressively targeting foreign students into their country, whereas we were saying, please don't come. In fact, we were actually saying, please leave. So
that's a Morrison government hangover. Was that a mistake?
I don't think we should have asked them to leave, yes. And secondly, you know, I worked a lot as Treasurer in our state with the universities to bring back students. And it was obviously contentious because you were balancing that with wanting to get Australians to come home. And there's obviously still very heightened concerns in relation to the spread of the virus. But there's a lot of work. I mean, to your question, there's a lot of work that we have to do, I think, reputationally, to not just to attract people into the country which have the skills that we need. So first things first, the backlog needs to be removed. But secondly, I agree with you, we can't have the arrogance to sit there and think that people just want to come to Australia. We're competing with countries from around the world. So I think some of the changes they've made today in terms of fast-tracking permanency, I think we'll go a long way to doing that.
What about childcare? You've been so forward-leaning on this. In fact, one of the first things you did as Premier, I think you upset the Treasurer at the time, your same side of politics, about childcare. You think it should be essentially run by the states, but there is a lot of movement there. We see this government not seeing it as a welfare measure, seeing it as a productivity one. How can you work with the Albanese government to actually improve what is, I think, really architecturally a mess?
Well, it is. And Laura, so a couple of things. Down there today at the summit, we spoke about the short-term issues of migration, that may solve labour shortages and skills shortages in the short term, but we cannot focus on long-term reform. And the point I made was that I think we're moving into a time now where we need to focus on looking at the areas of responsibility that may have laid with the Commonwealth or that may have laid with the states and say, no, you know what, let's go both get involved. And we did that in this year's budget in relation to over $5 billion for childcare to help construct more childcare centres, provide greater placements and training, particularly in those areas where there are childcare deserts.
Extra year of school. Yeah,
an extra in that pre-K. We did that with the Victorian government. And now that's a kind of mixture between Commonwealth and
I saw Dan
states.
Andrews getting all the credit for that yesterday. But...
Well, we worked. It's not about the credit, it's about the outcome.
Okay.
And we worked on that together, and I think that's nation-leading reform as well, that we've slowly moved towards over some time. But it's not just good for our kids, because we know the educational outcomes are important. But in addition to that, particularly with childcare as well, incredibly important for women's participation in the workforce and the economic opportunity that comes from the back of that. So, yes, let's focus on the short term and immigration, but simply adding people as well is only one part of driving economic growth. We need to be investing in our people, and I think the Commonwealth and the states need to continue to work together, not have a blame game situation to say, no, childcare's your responsibility, we're not touching it.